I was on Martha's Vineyard
I saw
doing
you
a
on Martha's
show
Vineyard with Robert Shaw.
Yeah, and I was doing a thing with Walter Cronkite. That's what, and I talked about Jaws being made, and I went over there and I ran into Shaw, whom I also did a show with. He was in trouble because if he worked much longer, he would lose his whatever it is, the complicated thing with taxes and so on, where he stayed in the country too long.
He put all his money in Ireland, and he didn't pay taxes, British taxes. But if he stayed too long in America, everything we paid him for Jaws would go to the IRS. And he was, every day he would remind me that he could only be there one more week, and we were only in our 40th day of shooting. And he was saying, if I'm here one more week, I lose all of my salary. And in fact, he lost about 3/4 of the money to the IRS because he overstayed his legal welcome.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, but I had an image of you, which I'll never forget.
Oh, please tell me. I love those.
You were you came to visit Robert and Walter Cronkite, and you were standing on one of the picture boats watching.
Yes.
And you had a little parka on, you had a little scarf on, and you were standing there all by yourself.
A little one, not mine?
No, it was... And the whole crew was watching you with great envy, and I was wondering why the crew was staring at you. And certainly they recognized you as being who you are, but then I began to look into their eyes, and I realized that you got to go home that night. And everybody else had to stay for 6 more months.
It was like someone visiting a prison.
A prison, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. How did you deal with that psychology? I mean, everybody with that burden on them must have.
We had people crack up. We really had people crack up. We had our gaffer, our lighting gaffer, go a little crazy, and he began wearing his baseball cap backwards, and he got a bullhorn, electric bullhorn, and began narrating the making of the movie, sitting on a small stepladder on a pitching and rolling boat, without just narrating who was coming aboard and who was doing this and who was making a mistake and picking up a plant, which is another union. You're not supposed to pick up a plant if you're a carpenter.
Yeah.
And
too much pressure.
Too much pressure. We had people go back to L.A. With their eyes swimming.
Well, of course, the old timers were saying, boy, they're these smart-ass people from Hollywood. They didn't even know about tides.
They're right. Yeah, the Coast Guard also came over one day in a helicopter with a bullhorn, laughing over the bullhorn. They keyed the mic and began to laugh, and we had to endure that for 5 minutes.
What were the? Let's get it on tape. What were the natural wonders and phenomena that you didn't know about? Besides tides and sky, I guess, were the things.
Well, the one natural phenomenon that none of us had any idea was that we couldn't walk on the water. We all assumed that we could get out to the ocean. It would be like working on dry land, or at worst, like on shallow jello.
Yeah.
And it turned out that when you've got your boats in the water and the wind starts to blow, all the anchors move. And when you're all set for a shot, there's a camera boat and there's a lighting boat with a generator, and there's the picture boat with the actors on it. And when the wind began to blow, each boat would move in a different direction, usually away from the center. And I often was standing shooting a horizon line, where before there was Scheider, Dreyfuss, and Shaw, there was nothing but a horizon. And it was chaos. It was total chaos. None of us, we should have really cooperated with the Coast Guard and let them show us how to make the movie, because none of us were seaworthy.
That would have saved a month, maybe, or something?
It would have saved a few weeks. The shark not working is what cost most of the time.
Well, the mechanical
shark never
not
worked.
working. I thought you meant that a live shark went on strike.
No.
It's about the only union that hasn't.
No. Brian De Palma, who came to the location once to visit me and left the very next day, went back and told all his friends his impression. He saw the first test of the shark, and he went back to New York, and he said, words won't describe it, and he made a hand gesture. He said, this was the first test of the shark, and the jaws open like this, and then I say, okay, close the jaws, and it's like so. And
I hate a slack-jawed shark.
Yeah, me too. 6 months of this.
But how do you ever get a shot from when the camera's on one boat and the actors are on another, unless it's dead calm, because the camera's always going to be moving?
Well, actually, that adds to the excitement. That's very good. If it's dead calm, or if the camera's too locked down to the boat, you don't have a feeling that you're on the water. It could even look like a process shot, like a rear projection effect.
So a little movement.
So a little movement is great. As a matter of fact, the man
Yeah.
who photographed Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, Michael Chapman, was the camera operator on Jaws, and he's an extraordinary operator. He handheld 70% of the movie just to keep some movement in the frame and still maintain a flat horizon line.
Would you ever do that on land, put a little movement in just to get a little, or would it have to be explained by being on water?
No, I haven't made my personal movie yet. That's a personal movie effect right there, is when you walk into a room with a camera and it's all sort of verite. But
Yeah.
I've always been a little more slick in terms of on land wanting to lock the camera down and essentially standardize most of the movements.
How long has that remarkable thing been around where they can, what's it called? The
Luma crane?
No, it's a camera that a man wears and can move around with, but it's so
Well,
counterweighted
called
and has such an
the
elaborate rig.
Steadicam.
Steadicam.
Yeah.
That even if he were to move like that, the camera won't because it compensates some way.
Yeah, you can't shoot a love scene with that camera. It's awful. You have to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you can follow people down corridors and up staircases. The great effect in Rocky, which I think sold Steadicam to the industry, was when Stallone runs up the stairs and turns. That's a man running next to him as fast as Stallone is going with the camera handheld.
That wouldn't have been possible before. with
No,
the
not
way
before at all. You would
that-
have had to build an intricate dolly track and counterweighted because you're going up a 30-degree slope. It would have been impossible.
Gee, that's interesting stuff. I like all of that stuff. I remember, yes, it was the day as you were shooting where he slides toward the jaws of the shark, I believe, and the sinking tug.
I'm sorry you were there for that.
And,
That was a terrible day.
Yeah, there was an old sea captain there, a real one, who was not impressed at all by the movie people.
Yeah.
They never are. They make a point of that.
That's right. But they make a lot of money by taking greenhorns like us fishing for shark out off Montauk, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's where they are.
Yeah.
I know a pilot. You know, sharks became very fashionable because of your movie, and there's a pilot who flies from the point of Long Island to New York and back. And he said, half the time I see sharks in among the bathers at Jones Beach. So they don't know they're there. They're always around.
Yeah, well,
So
sharks
this
are like
goes
any.
a bit-
Sharks
yeah.
are like men of war in the water, or bass, or just another sea animal, and they really don't. They don't attack man. The great white shark has been most, and much maligned for going after man. In fact, he does, but there are fewer of them, so we hear less about it.
That's right.
Yes.
But if they're right among those bathers all the time, yeah, it proves that they don't always attack. Well, what did you do with your non-working shark problem? Did the shark's mechanical specialist have to rebuild the thing constantly?
Well, the first mistake with the shark was they made a big mistake and they built it for fresh water. Now, they all knew we were going to the Atlantic Ocean, but for some reason they built it for fresh water.
What's the difference?
Well, electrolysis is a major problem when you get salt into all the machinery, into the electrical system.
Sure.
And so they tested the shark for the first time in the water, and we had at least 20 boats of tourists who had gathered around an area to watch the shark work. And we had the shark on a huge 90-foot platform 30 feet underwater, and at the press of a hydraulic button and pulling a lever back, supposedly the shark comes shooting out of the water head first. And this has absolutely happened because David Brown, Dick Zanuck were there watching with me. The shark came up tail first. It just came up tail first, and it was like it was like a 25-foot moon. And all of the tourists out there essentially, went back. I guess reread Peter Betterstein's book in hopes that the book would be more exciting than the movie. But that was the first test of the shark. It was a total disaster. We never fixed the shark, but in the cutting room, I was able to use so little of it and imply so much more that when you finally do see the shark, it's a little bit lethargic, and that's where the story demanded that I show more than just the dorsal fin. And that was the last few minutes of the movie.
Nobody suggested using a real trained shark or anything.
They did, as a matter of fact. They did suggest
Serious?
that. We, Dick Zanuck, who is an amazing guy, I think he's one of the best producers in the world today, and he had a great old Hollywood idea. He said, why don't we use a real shark, but when we shoot all the scenes with Richard Dreyfuss in the cage, we'll use a midget in the cage and build a half-size cage, so it'll make a 15-foot great white shark look like a 30-foot great white shark. So I said, well, why don't we try it? So Universal spent some money, and we actually went to Australia with a midget who told us that he knew how to scuba dive. As a matter of fact, I was interviewing midgets one day for this part. Absolutely a true story. And one of the small gentleman came into my office covered in blood. He had cuts here, he had cuts here, his arms were cut. And I said, what happened to you? He said, well, look, I really got to get this job, and I just racked up my car in front of the Universal Studio Tour gate, and I got into a traffic accident, but I had to come in to get the job. I didn't want to be late. It was 3 o'clock. He was going to be late. So we had the ambulance attendants come around to my office to take care of him. And I assumed anybody who was that brave to leave an accident to get a job, to go into the water with a real live shark, deserves the job. So we sent him to Australia with Ron and Valerie Taylor, who I'm sure you must have heard of.
Yeah? Oh, yes. You see them in film. You see her down among the sharks.
Blue Water, White Death.
Yeah.
Yeah, she plays with the sharks.
Yeah.
So, it's like a Joan Emery of underwater, that sort of thing.
You realize how many bleeding midgets are going to audition for you now?
Well, the thing of it was, he was drinking coffee one day after 2 days of having no luck even finding a great white, and there were some very bright metallic miniature cages in a small boat being towed by the larger boat in Australia. And one of the sharks, being attracted by the lure of this silver, came out of the water and bit the cage in the boat and took the cage out of the boat. And the guy suddenly was no longer there. The midget was gone. They couldn't find him. He had locked himself into the head of the ship and wouldn't come out. And Valerie had to take a butter knife and unlock the door and make him aware that he was being paid $10,000 to perform That's Incredible.
Are you saying that the shark reached up into the boat and took
It was
the
very
cage,
easy.
or a cage that was being dragged?
It was a cage that was being dragged that the shark got hold of and tore to pieces.
Yeah.
The cage that he was going to go in.
My image is that sharks get up into the boat that I'm in and start after me. I've had that.
Yeah, that's
The best thing to do
nightmare.
when you see a shark, if you're in the water, is the first rule is to get into the center of a large city. That's my advice.
Well, Jaws 3 is about a land shark. It's about it's about a shark who is killed in Jaws 2, becomes a ghost, and haunts the city.
One of the dread land sharks. I thought they were all agents. Oh, but seriously, folks.